Inflation. So this is a picture of a dollar becoming smaller and smaller as you go from left to right. Now, the government tells us that inflation is when prices rise, which is a nice, convenient way of saying we have nothing to do with this. It's just some kind of fluke. There's something happening in the universe and people are just raising their prices. But a more useful definition for inflation, which actually pinpoints the cause of the problem, is too much money chasing too little goods. In other words, we have a lot more money, but the same amount of things to buy. So here's an example. This is a house that in 1990 was worth $100,000. And now, 2021, it's worth $450,000. Is there any more house there? No. In fact, the house might be a little worse off because it's now 30 years old. And so inflation's caused by an increase in money. The graph I'm about to show you is a dollar bill that's torn. And the top edge of the torn dollar bill is actually the graph. And the graph is how much food, clothing, shelter, ice cream cones a single dollar could buy. Each year from 1913, when the Federal Reserve Bank was created, until 2018, because that's when they quit making this graph. And we're told that inflation is when prices rise, but it's also a measure of how much less the dollar can buy. So let's take a look at that. Remember that? You saw it before. And if you look, you'll see that the data is from the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank. This is not something I made up. On the left is 1913, and on the right is 2018. And the taller the dollar bill is, that's up to actually being worth $1. So if we consider that the dollar was worth $1 in 1913, it then stayed up there for a couple of years, but then it made a sharp plunge because now we're doing paper dollars. And so it goes up a little, it goes up a little more. And then you'll notice in 1934, remember I told you about the gold certificates, no longer backed by gold and silver. 1934 starts its slant coming down, and it just keeps on coming down. And today, actually ever since about 1990, the dollar is worth less than 10 cents. It's actually lost something like 95% of its value. Now, remember that I said it's more dollars being printed and that's what reduces the value of the dollar? Let's see if that's true. Let's look at a graph of money printing. Once again, this graph is from the Federal Reserve Bank. I didn't make it up. It's the US money supply in trillions of dollars. And it starts in 1970 and it goes to 2020. And you'll notice that as the money supply increases, the amount of money circulating and in bank accounts, as that increases, it goes way up. And you remember, that's what happened to the dollar. So 1970 is right about here. And so this graph matches that graph. So do we have a condition where the more money we print, the less value the dollar has? That leads us to say, well, is there a solution? If the endless printing of money is the source of the problem, and by the way, just kind of put a point on this, is anybody here familiar with what's going on in Venezuela with money? Argentina, Nigeria, these countries are all experiencing inflation rates at least 40% a year, 40% a year. In Germany, after the First World War, when the Allies who won the First World War made Germany start to pay back the money that was lost, they had to make what was called reparation for the war that they committed, and the British and the French and the Americans wanted them to pay. The Germans decided to handle that by inflating. And the inflation in post-war Germany was so bad that people had to literally take a lunch break, get their pay for the day, and go out and buy things, because by dinner time, the prices would already be higher. There is no country we can think of, or that I know of, that has fiat money, which is to say money that's not backed by gold or silver. fiat is the Latin word for let it be. So when you had an emperor who said, okay, let's go conduct war on Germany and conquer that territory, the Roman generals would say fiat, meaning let it be. I'm going to do what you say. So fiat money is money that is commanded. And what we have in the United States today, and in Germany and in England and in France and many, many countries around the world, the developed countries, is we have fiat money. What backs it are the guns and soldiers that say you have to use this money. And so the endless printing of money, which is fiat money, is a source of the problem. The solution would have to some way limit the amount of money that can be printed. Now, there is a currency that has a limit, and it's also outside the control of the government and the central banks. And that might be a solution. Here's a graph of the price of Bitcoin. And the reason I have Bitcoin up there is because Bitcoin has a limit on it. Bitcoin, there'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. But we're looking at something that has a limit because that forces the governments to stay in line.